Afternoon, everybody who's joined us live. Good morning or good evening if you're joining us and watching the recording a little bit later on. Lovely to have you in any sort of format. It's great to see you, folks. We talked about when I was talking to Jason and Taylor and Caroline, etc. We felt that an important topic for today may well be talking about this idea of fatigue and what it means, because there's an obvious issue around safety and fatigue. Of course there is. We'll touch on that as well. But I think what's even more important is the different types of fatigue that we can experience in the workplace. And they're not all necessarily work-related. So I think that's an interesting point that we'll uncover as we go through today as well. So today, welcome aboard. Thank you. Great to see you all. Today we're talking about fatigue. I think Taylor's just joined us as well. Hello, Taylor. How are you? Few little statistics here about fatigue and really what it sort of means and how it affects us. 81% of jobs have a high risk of fatigue. That's an interesting point. 81%. So most jobs have a high risk of fatigue related to them. Not just manually taxing work, but mentally as well. And usually when I'm talking about this topic, I would say to people, think about the healthcare sector and, doctors and nurses in training expected to do 48-hour shifts and all that stupid stuff that's unnecessary. Don't know why they still do it, but they do. But also thinking of your own roles. Everything that we have been asked to do at council and over the last, since February probably, when the floods began, we've been doing extremely taxing work, extremely difficult, challenging work. 43% of people don't get enough breaks in their day, or they don't get enough sleep, I should say, sorry. And so many people don't sort of take sort of rest breaks that they need because they don't feel that they've got time. So fatigue creeps up on all of us. And as I say, there's a high risk of fatigue in most jobs. So there's a question of, am I sort of feeling exhausted? Or could it be because I'm unwell? Or do I just need some rest? Am I collapsing in a heap in the evenings? Am I struggling to get out of bed in the morning? Am I ticking more of these boxes than I'm prepared to admit? It's entirely possible. But I will say this, as we've just said, 81% of jobs have a high risk of fatigue to them. And as I said, not just manual labor, but mental as well. And I'm going to touch on that in a minute. Here's an important point. Most accidents, most work-related accidents happen in this few weeks leading up to Christmas. And it's usually because we're trying to get stuff done, get it off our shelves, get it off off the books, if you like, so that we can sort of lean into having a good Christmas break. So most accidents happen in these few weeks between now and Christmas annually. And fatigue is a leading cause of those accidents. I talked about a few minutes ago that mentally taxing as well as manually taxing work can lead to fatigue. Of course it can. Decision-making. Even minute decisions that we have to make on a continual basis can have a sort of a cumulative effect. And here's the thing about our brains, that they take up about 2% of our body weight, but they take up about 20% of our energy. So they're quite energy sort of taxing and energy demanding on us. And having to make decisions all the time can actually be exhausting as well. It accumulates. So it's important in work environments to have sort of processes in place that does a lot of that for us. We have systems and processes, and there's reasons why we do things the way we do. And from a safety perspective, more than in any other environment, if you like. So processes are important. Of course, safety is important. But this is a kind of a double-edged sword, because another element of tiredness and exhaustion can be a lack of autonomy in our roles. So even though decision-making can be exhausting and tiring, not having the capacity to make decisions can also be a leader of burnout. So it's a question of finding the balance between the two. I don't necessarily have the answer. because it's going to be subjective to whichever way you're going to be experiencing it. It will determine sort of how often it becomes a problem for an individual, whether having not enough autonomy or too much autonomy. So this much is clear. Fatigue affects most people. It's a risk factor in most jobs, 81% of jobs. It's not just physical exhaustion, it's mental as well. And it leads to accidents. And we'll delve into what that looks like in just a few minutes. But let's kind of have a look at fatigue itself, just the idea rather than the effect. So let's looking at some of the causes. Fatigue breaks down into sort of two areas, if you like: pathological or sort of medical sort of issues. When something is physically or medically wrong that has us feeling tired, chronic stress, fatigue, stress itself, sleep deprivation, insomnia, some kind of underlying medical condition can cause what we would call a pathological fatigue. And it's not going to be relieved by rest and relaxation. We need to understand that. We need to seek sort of help, some kind of primary care help when there's a pathological reason for our fatigue. And about 1 in 3 will experience lingering sort of fatigue after an illness. Just think about long COVID. That's in the conversations right now. But things like flu, things like injuries.
Excuse me, Rosie, there? Yeah.
Pamela, can I ask you to mute yourself if that's all right? Thank you. 1/3 of people will experience lingering fatigue after an illness. And in actual fact, about 50% of people in the first week or so of experiencing some kind of pathological injury can cause this sort of element of fatigue. And look, it's the body recovering, it's the body repairing itself. So we have to give that a little bit of time in order to do that. But definitely rest and relaxation isn't always enough. We may need some sort of help and support around it. But there's also what I would call, so let me get out of your way, non-pathological fatigue. So there's no real medical reason for it. It's usually some kind of lifestyle related challenge.
Can I have a look, please?
Pamela, I'm going to mute you as well. There you go. Sorry. If there's a non-pathological reason, it can be harder to deal with. So there's no medical issue, but you might experience something like a limited ability to go to the gym, maybe just even getting through your workday. But what you will experience, you'll pay attention. If you pay attention to the messages from your body, there'll be something telling you that you need some rest. There's not a medical reason for it. It's just lifestyle choices. And the lifestyle choices that we take around a non-pathological tiredness or exhaustion or fatigue, basically the things we do for self-care: rest, good food, drink plenty of water, gentle exercise, meditate, connect with other people, go and have a laugh, have a bit of a play somewhere to support yourself around recovering from your fatigue. But sometimes it just happens that the tiredness that we experience can be related to stress, workload. It can be sleep deprived. You've got kids. It can be anxiety, something that has us waking up during the night, or it can be a recent illness. Something can occur that's not medically related, but it is related to our lifestyle that has us actually feeling tired. And maybe in that sort of a case, let's have a look at some of the different sort of myths or facts that we can think about around tiredness, exhaustion, fatigue, etc. One of the great ones is asking ourselves, am I an early bird or am I a night owl? And I invite you to ask yourself that while we're sitting here thinking about that now. There's this whole idea of the early bird gets the worm, early to bed, early to rise, makes someone healthy, wealthy, and wise. There's sorts of conversations like that. There's actually no scientific weight behind this idea of getting up early is actually better for you. It's cultural. It's a societal belief. There's a sort of an inference there that if you're the type of person who gets up early, you're getting stuck into your day. It means you're not lazy, etc., etc. But there's no actual scientific evidence to it. It works for me, and in actual fact, I have to sometimes work hard at it, but I just find I'm at my best in the mornings. I used to be a kind of a studier at nighttime, but that's kind of changed as time has gone on. And I find I'm at my best now earlier in the morning. So it suits me to get up early and get some stuff done. But, decide for yourselves. It's going to be different for everybody. There's this idea that switching off screens will kind of resolve our sleeping problems. There's an element of truth to that. Yeah. There's a blue light that comes from, I'm just watching I've got a challenging internet. Quite quitting his next month. Yeah, sorry. That's all right, Taylor. We'll get to it. Blue light can keep us awake. That's the light that comes from our computer screens and our iPhones, etc. But putting them away just before going to bed isn't actually enough. You kind of need about 3 hours before going to bed for it to be sort of really effective. But every little will help. Certainly reading your phone or your iPad while you're in bed is probably not the smartest move, even though we all do it. I'm guilty as well. Waking during the night can cause us stress about not getting enough sleep. And again, I'm kind of guilty of that, I have to say. I worry if I wake up in the middle of the night that I'm going to be tired the next day. But it turns out that it's perfectly normal to wake up sometimes during the night. It's not a problem. If you're doing it continually, might be worth addressing your stress levels and maybe doing some meditation or getting up earlier in the morning so you're more tired at night, that sort of thing. Speaking of getting up in the morning or going to bed at a regular time, there's science behind this is if we get into a regular pattern, what we will find is the body prepares itself for sleep. So melatonin is released about an hour before our usual bedtime when we set into a pattern. And when we have that pattern of melatonin released, then we will go to sleep at a sort of a regular time. Our body and our brains figure out how to do that pretty quickly. Correspondingly, if we start to wake up at the same time every day, then cortisol gets released about an hour before we wake up, and that gives us the energy to sort of rise in the morning. So there's a great value in doing that, and it makes a lot of sense to do it on a regular basis. What we're doing when we don't focus on that on a regular basis, are we interrupted? We're triggering our fight or flight response in our bodies to suggest that it suggests that sometimes we may not get the sort of sleep that we need, because once we interrupt it, what we're saying is we're under some kind of attack or we're under some sort of danger, so we need to stay awake in order to see what's going on. Then the melatonin doesn't get released, and then in the morning the cortisol doesn't get released at the right time. So there's definitely an advantage to getting into that regularity, but the focus needs to be setting the right time to wake up. If you do that regularly, getting up at the same time, that's what will determine what the right time to go to bed is, because your body will seek the sort of sleep that it needs. So there's if you focus on the getting up time, the rest of it will take care of itself. That's basically the message there. Get to bed and get up at a regular time, focus on the getting up. Everything else will fall into place. We do know that sleeping for less than 5 hours a day can lead to 2 or more chronic illnesses. Things like cancer, things like diabetes, heart issues, etc. We know now that when we don't get sufficient sleep, the glymphatic system doesn't get time to physically flush toxins from the brain. And that's where things like Alzheimer's can affect us in later years. So sleep is crucial to well-being. It's really, really a big part of it. If you're the type of person that finds a coffee at 3 o'clock in the afternoon helps your exhaustion and your tiredness, my suggestion to you would be eat a sandwich. Don't drink a coffee. Because what you're not looking for the sort of energy buzz from coffee. What you're actually looking for is energy from food. Because your brain, as we said earlier, takes about 2% of your body weight, takes about 20% of your energy. So if you're tired at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it's your energy you need is from food. So keep part of your lunch and eat it at 3 o'clock, or eat a sandwich or something like that. That's your best chance of overcoming that sort of issue around around tiredness in the middle of the day. So we've covered tiredness, we've covered sleep. They're all part of fatigue, but at what point do they, become exhaustion? And maybe first of all, the question would be, how does fatigue affect safety, which is Taylor's area here, and she's here. Fatigue slows down our reaction time. Fatigue reduces our attention span, interestingly. It limits our short-term memory. That's kind of newish to me. I wasn't aware of that. But here's the most important part, is it impairs our judgment. Now, we said a little while ago that it's important that we have some level of autonomy. But that level of autonomy, if we're making decisions, snap decisions quite often, and we're tired or we're fatigued in some way, then the decisions we make might not be the smartest ones. And if that leads to a safety issue, well, then that's a much bigger problem. But its biggest problem occurs when it's something that happens on a chronic or a continual basis and we're not taking care of ourselves properly. So let's have a quick chat. Watching the time. Let's have a quick chat about the types of exhaustion we can experience, and particularly in the areas of burnout. You can see three main areas here on your screen. There's mental exhaustion, there's physical exhaustion, and there's emotional exhaustion. And if you're experiencing some level of burnout as a result of chronic stress and overwork, or your workload or work design, something is going on. It could be any one of these three that you first notice or you first experience. Like emotional exhaustion will lead to anxiety and depression, hopelessness, and that sort of avoidance of basically avoidance of the role that you have to do, and potentially avoidance of other people as well, because you just don't have the energy for them. Mental exhaustion relates to things like cynicism, that sort of apathy, or that sort of unfavorable gossip that can occur, etc. That pessimism can occur. Mental exhaustion is also related to perfectionism, which is a form of anxiety. We may experience that. And then the physical exhaustion, which we know, we're just talking about, sleep patterns are all over the place, our appetites all over the place. Our immune system is affected when we're physically tired and we don't take care of it. There can be problems that are related to that as well. So there's a number of different ways different sort of areas where we can be exhausted. Exhausted is fatigue in a chronic state. In other words, it's not addressed in a timely manner, if you like. So that can be a real problem, particularly when it leads to burnout. And I just want to touch on this for a second. When we talk about burnout, not all burnout is work-related. And in fact, I'll even say to you, work-related burnout is not a person problem. It's an organizational problem. It's the work type. So when somebody is in that, where's my little pointer? Here we go. Where has he gone? When somebody's in that work-related burnout sort of space, we're talking about things like little control over their work. So that autonomy question. It's monotonous work. Or it could be chaotic work, a high-pressure workplace. Remember, we said 81% of jobs today have a high risk of burnout. And there are more mentally taxing jobs than there are manually taxing jobs these days. So work-related sort of exhaustion and work-related burnout is one area. But there are two other areas of exhaustion that can occur that are not work-related. Lifestyle choices. So we're working too much. That can be a choice. We've no sort of work-life balance. And the first thing to go when that happens is this idea of some kind of like element of play or fun in our lives. It's the first thing we get rid of. A lack of close relationships can be a challenge. Taking on too much in all areas of our lives. And sometimes we don't even get a choice around that. It could be caring for kids. It could be caring for, adults, parents that are sort of in special needs. And then as a result of that, the poor sort of sleep we get. There's other exhaustion around what we call personality. So that's like perfectionism or workaholic for the term. People pleasers will find themselves in this space, the ones who can't say no. Or even a lower sort of self-esteem can be a challenge for people as well. So there's a number of different types of exhaustion that are related to burnout. It's not always work. Sometimes it can be something else. But when it is work related, this exhaustion, this fatigue is only one part of a number of different areas that are related to how we become burnt out. But it's very often the first one we'll notice, just that exhaustion and tiredness, and then that affects our ability to do our job and ability to sort of connect with other people. And when that occurs, we have what we call this apathy that starts to appear, this kind of cynicism, and this kind of, we just lose the ability to care. And that can become a real problem for us in exhaustion as well. But the other one that's usually missing from this conversation is this, what we call affect. An affect disorder, broadly speaking, is the type of disorder that occurs when we have an emotional response to external situations. Things like anxiety and depression, etc., would sort of interfere with our sort of emotional response and how we actually sort of participate, if you like. When we don't deal with our fatigue as it occurs, there's a bit of a snowball effect here you can see, and it's exhausting in itself, if you like. So I'm mindful of time, and I want to leave a few minutes for questions. So if there were 3 takeaways from all of this, I would say fatigue is definitely a safety issue. Most roles and jobs have a high risk of fatigue. Fatigue impairs, as we said, it slows our reaction time, it impairs our attention span, it limits our short-term memory, and it interferes in our sort of level of judgment, if you like. So that's the first thing. It is absolutely a safety issue. Taking aside the pathological or medical reasons for tiredness, mostly they're non-medical related, and they're to do with lifestyle choices. So take your rest, take your breaks, get to go to bed so that you get up at the same time every day, and then get your exercise and get your sleep, etc., etc. So I think it's really important. Oh, there you go. Okay, I think it's really important that we understand that mostly lifestyle choice. We can do something about it. And last of all, if we're exhausted, don't just assume it's because of work. There's a number of other areas in our lives where we can be affected by it as well. If anybody's got any questions, oh God, how do I get out of my own way? I know I'll do this and then I'll do that. So as per usual, folks, if anybody's got any questions or anything that they want to touch on with me, you can access me here any way you like. My new book, which is called Up Yours, The Pursuit of Radical Self-Care, will be coming out. It's early February now. I was hoping to get it out before Christmas, but it won't. But if you're interested, you can use that scan QR code and just pre-order the book and be ready for it when it comes out. When I talk about radical self-care, what I'm talking about is kind of far-reaching and thorough and sort of from the ground up, from the roots, from the foundation, if you like. Self-care is so much more than sleep, diet, and exercise. And that's the sort of message that I'll be delivering in the book. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing now and see if we've got any questions from anybody.